Volume 7 C 123. Brain's heart felt like it was ready to explode as he went down, sank to one knee, and said, "All my life I've wandered alone, ever since I was a boy. That won't change now as an emperor. I'll wander all over the empire to see that it is what it should be, what it could be, and make it the kind of place our daughter will grow up happy in. Join me. Be my empress, and we'll wander the empire, and our neighbor states, together." Zesh's brief panic when he began to fall to one knee redoubled when she realized what he was asking, and that he still had her hand and could no doubt feel her rushing pulse. You can't just catch a woman off guard like that," she squeaked out. "Just say yes, Mama," Layali shouted, breaking the stillness of the disbelieving crowd. "I'm getting there. Obviously the answer is yes. But I can't have your papa thinking he can just take me by surprise like that. It sets a bad precedent," Zesh exclaimed and yanked him to his feet. They kissed, passionately, even violently as if engaged in another duel. And the roar of the unexpecting crowd began again. "Long live the Emperor! Long live the Empress!" The crier shouted, and the crowd took up the call as if it were a religious chant. Swords, spears, fists. All echoed the refrain. Up above, the royalty around Ein stared at him in dismay, save for one. "But you appointed Oreolomega, you. I don't understand." Kalka's voice was full of questions, but Albedo was quick to stop the curiosity with a silvery laugh. "You're still a novice at this game, I suppose," Albedo said with a winsome smile when her bosom stilled and her heady laughter died. "When our lord decided upon Oreolomega, I of course perceived a fragment of his plan, though I had to explain it to her first. You see, the kingdom of Nazarick is new, its power spreads far and wide, but this can only create more fear since so few of our people are known anywhere. His master plan goes all the way back to the winning of our first outside champions. By recruiting those of this world to his side, our master has ensured we have ambassadors of a sort. People with ties to new lands who will set those peoples at ease. If we had sent Oreolomega to fight, she would have won, but who knows her? Such ignorance creates anxiety. But by recruiting famous names who are well known or recognized, Fluda, the Four Knights, the Adventurers, Moman, and more, we make others comfortable with our dominion. So Brain Nuncleus. He wasn't yours from the beginning?" Draudillan asked. Albedo's smile was inhuman in its breadth across her face. "Precisely, we made him one of ours. He will rule, and slowly make the Empire comfortable with us again. If it takes a generation to forget the lost war, so what? We have time." She gave a dismissive wave and turned her head to watch the new royal couple hold up the new princess and announce her as such by raising her overhead together and calling out her name. "But you had this all planned, all the way back from the beginning, from the moment the tournament to decide the strongest and win the throne was even suggested?" the Wolf Queen asked, looking straight at Ain's. Ain's mind was racing as he tried to grasp how Albedo came to the conclusion that she had. Recalling the day of selection, he muttered out loud, "It won't even be a contest." One and all, save for Albedo, they gasped as the significance of Oreolomega's words hit home. "What?" Ainz asked when the gasp went up. "Did I say something odd?" "No, my lord, you have only astounded them with your foresight, as expected of my child's father," Albedo said and put his hand over where her child grew. His intention to wander the empire while governing might be a good one, at least at first, settling them down and making them comfortable, consolidating power. But that is still potentially dangerous. The Queen of Frost remarked. "I had to do the same when my rule began after the war, and every now and then I still had to put down trouble." "That too has been arranged," Albedo said with a smirk. She raised one finger to call for a moment of silence until the gate opened. Through it came 5 figures familiar to only 2 of those present. Renna, for once, was caught entirely unawares. "You didn't?" She snapped her jaw shut in disbelief. The 5 were clad in white armor and cloaks taken from the treasury of Nazarick, and they knelt when Ainz stood and faced them all. "They're not quite themselves, at least not as they were. Demiurge has improved them somewhat," Albedo said as she moved aside to allow the other royals to look the arrivals over. "They're not exactly human anymore, but they can look like their old selves, and that's all they need. A few more famous names to set the common people and nobles alike all at ease, and protect our new ally." The woman in the center drew her sword and pressed the tip to the stone, bowed her head, and as the others put their hands over their hearts and lowered their gazes in turn, she spoke. Lakuse presents herself to her master, her Lord Creator, crusher of the cursed blade, and true Lord of this world. Tell us, what commands will you give to your unholy roses? She and the small one are still a bit melodramatic. Albedo critiqued offhandedly. But having a few extra greater doppelgangers around has made Pandora's actor extremely happy, and of course, that is what our master wants, for all his children. Glad to know the answer to at least one thing, Ines immediately agreed, saying, "Yes, it is. That is exactly what I desire. Now, perhaps we should go meet with the new Emperor and Empress, and celebrate their coronation before we acknowledge them and secure the Empire's stability, or does anyone have anything more?" Ines suggested, and when there was not he looked down at the face of Lakuse. A pity she had to die, but she couldn't adapt as she was, and she's fine now at least. He acknowledged to himself, his heart skipping a beat when he realized how little that meant to him despite having at least briefly been comrades. "Come with us," he said to the unholy roses, and the royals who found themselves within his sphere, and led the way out. Volume 7 c. 124. The coronation was a whirlwind of activity that surpassed any battle either Brain or Zeshi had ever experienced, with the soldiers of the Empire who were stationed in our winter personally marching their new emperor to the palace directly from the arena. Crowds lined the streets as the impromptu parade began in earnest. Cheers and shouts went up as lords and ladies of the nobility began to fill the streets. For Brain as much as for Zeshi, it was a dreamlike and surreal scene. While riding on their shoulders between the two, Layali seemed to be beyond excited, waving her hands, laughing and smiling with excitement as people professed their loyalty to the new royal family. The smell of alcohol was thick in the air as casks of ale and wine alike were cracked open and vendors began to turn it into their busiest of business days. The sun's descent continued at their backs and vanished as, on the steps of the royal palace, the crown of Emperor and Empress was placed on the still bruised-up faces of the royal pair. The priest, an aged man clad in white and gold-trimmed robes, intoned a prayer as all those near enough to see or hear, knelt and vowed their allegiance. Zeshi leaned over to Brain as the white-robed man continued to drone on using words she had no real interest in. "You know I pulled my punches, right? I know, you were used to me being weak. Now you know you don't have to anymore," he whispered back to her and held out his right hand in front of Layali. Zeshi cracked a little grin and took his right hand in her left, and with a gleeful and somewhat disruptive shout, Layali laid her hands over both of theirs to join in the gesture. A roar went up when it was over and done, and the pair entered the towering halls of the mighty palace at last, escorted by a handful of guards, who led the trio to the throne room. "Your seats, my lord, my lady," the full-plate armored guard said and held his salute until the Emperor and Empress somewhat awkwardly returned it and claimed the golden seats. "Now what?" Zeshi asked him as the guards took their seats. "I don't know, I've never been an emperor before," Brain said and looked to the nearby guard. "Do you have any advice?" "Ah, yes, my lord." "Ah, the council of course is happy to assist, and also, there is someone they call the scholar." The guard cleared his throat and with somewhat jittery fingers, raised the cover of his helmet to speak. "The scholar?" Brain asked and shrugged. "Why do they call him that?" "Because nobody knows his name. When the council started to govern, they had trouble, until letters came from a monastery. The signature bore only the name, the scholar, offering all manner of advice, including the suggestion of seeking the Allfather's help in securing stability." The guard bit his lip and waited to find out if he'd pleased the powerful Emperor and Empress, but Brain had another question. "Why is it that he is anonymous? Why not come here himself?" Brain pressed. "I've never run an empire before, but it seems like it might be easier with a little help on hand from a competent sort of guy." "My lord, I know only what I have heard, but apparently the scholar refuses to leave the monastery, in part because, strange as it may sound, the party sent to retrieve him states that he is utterly ashamed of his baldness, and has only bad memories of the capital, which he blames for causing his condition." The guard explained, and Brain rubbed his chin. "I see. I have to admit, I'm curious. I'd like to meet this scholar," Brain said and looked at his betrothed and their daughter. "Should that be our first trip?" "It's as good as any," Zeshi said and rubbed her hands together. "This is a big empire and we have to see it all." "Forgive me my lord, my lady, But the Allfather and his entourage of allies and client queens, along with the delegation from the slain theocracy, should be here shortly. Should we prepare something for them all? The guard swallowed audibly and looked nervously toward the entrance.
Yes.
Yes, do that, Brain said, giving his first order as an emperor. We can prepare for our journey tomorrow. All Zesshi had to do, however, was look at him after that for him to read her thoughts in a look. You are going to explain everything, the woman, the power, what Layali did. No more secrets after that last one. He nodded toward her, and they settled in to greet the assembly of power. Emperor Angleus, Ein said, placing his hand over his chest, I am Ein Zulgaun. Of that, Brain had no doubt. He had met men with charisma before, people who just naturally saw others fall in at their backs and follow them. He had seen men of terror who inspired loyalty and awe, and he had seen the dignity of kings in even the lowest slave. But the human before his eyes all but glowed with presence, so this is the man I gave my loyalty to. The one who made the trade with Layali and gave me my heart's desire, all my dreams old and new. Brain thought and rose to his feet. Brain stood up as one by one the queens of the surrounding kingdoms introduced themselves in turn. And I am Raymond, Cardinal of the slain theocracy, Raymond said when his turn came. I don't suppose you remember me, do you, Emperor Angleus, Brain Angleus, and my soon-to-be wife, Zesshi Zetsome, Brain said, introducing themselves with a squeeze to Zesshi's hand. And yes, I do recall you, Cardinal, though, forgive me, you look tired. Are you resting well? Raymond pursed his lips and answered, it has been a mixed experience since we last met. Our daughter, Princess Layali, Zesshi said, putting her hand on the girl's head. She then looked at Raymond's face, and the way he glanced from Layali to herself and back. Of course, Raymond may not need an introduction toward me, but... Layali winked up toward Ainz and mouthed the word, ice cream? The Allfather held back a chuckle at the girl's priority, though he gave her a subtle nod that had her immediately become a trifle antsy, shifting a bit on her feet. The new empress crouched down beside Layali and raised a hand to point at the cardinal, drawing the child's eyes toward him. Layali, you can think of that man as a grandfather. He used to look after me, before I grew up out here and found you. Raymond's pursed lips began to curl upward, shakily, awkwardly, but they did, and he leaned forward toward the new princess. I'm not sure what to say now, but... Princess, everything will be fine, whatever happens next. Layali looked at Raymond with some reticence. Then up to her mama and papa and asked, what's Grandpa talking about? Layali, if we work hard, by the time you're old enough to get it, you won't even need to understand. Brain answered. Nobody intended to argue with that. Volume 7 C 125, Epilogue. Epilogue. 3 months after the coronation. The Elf King is dead? Are you serious? Dominic exclaimed with a mix of glee and horror alike. Zesshi beat him to death in the arena. It was the most brutal killing I've ever seen, except for maybe the one of Cerebrate by the new emperor, Raymond said to those who sat around the council table. The cardinals around him rumbled with a mix of emotions, and for several minutes Raymond allowed them to continue before he cleared his throat. This is the least of our concerns. The Elf King's death was always a given. We'd been promising Zesshi that since her power first manifested and she was enrolled in the Black. Sending her there was fulfilling our promise. Unfortunately, it backfired. She learned the truth, and she's more than a little angry with our country. I tried to warn you in my letters before I even rushed back here, but based on what I've seen on the way since, you haven't listened. Raymond looked at them reprovingly, one by one, compelling their sullen silence. So? He demanded. The Draconic Kingdom has cut off all trade with us. Berenice acknowledged. So has the Kingdom of Kani, the Kingdom of Riastais, the Baharuth Empire, the Empire of Nazarick, as they style themselves now, and the Roble Holy Kingdom. D. Malbian has never been a trading partner, but we've sent overtures to King Mer of the Elf Kingdom, and their ambassador is waiting to join us now. Speaking of the elves, Raymond, you still haven't explained what happened with the slave I sent to you. That animal was exceptionally expensive, and you came back without it. Dominic made a sour face and put on his perpetual frown. Raymond kept his face carefully neutral. Personal matters can wait until the end of public business, he said, and the others gave sage nods when the leader of the scriptures nodded to the guard at the door. Go ahead and send the ambassador in, we should get this done. The guard opened the door, and Nua walked through it, clad in the green and white silk clothing of a royal traveler, with her pants running into high brown leather boots and a black cloak shimmering in the light that shone through the tower window. Her hood was back and her ears danced up and down the moment she caught sight of Raymond. I am Nua Kalanauna, ambassador from King Maer I, here on matters of trade. Will you hear the words of the Elf Kingdom? She asked, keeping her face neutral and her lips tight when she saw Cardinal Dominic seated at the far side of the round table. His eyes bulged in outrage and fury, his fingers closed into fists when he looked at her, and she let her lips turn up ever so slightly at the corners, turning his face red in the process. Go on, Ambassador Auna, Raymond said benignly as he claimed his seat again. The Elf Kingdom is now a vassal of the Allfather of the Empire of Nazarick, while the then Kingdom of Nazarick called you allies in the brief skirmish against the Elf Kingdom. He and King Maer have both expressed disappointment that the prisoners of war have not been returned to their homes. As such, all trade is prohibited between the lands of the elves and the slain theocracy. We demand the immediate return of all elven captives taken since the war against the Elf King began, and furthermore, we propose and expect that a program of repatriation will begin the return of all slaves held in bondage within the territory of the theocracy, to begin within 1 year and to take no more than 7 years of implementation. Dominic's mouth opened to shout her down, his rage ready to fly off of his tongue in a torrent of hatred and vitriol. It was only the kick of a foot to his ankle that stopped him. I am afraid we can't comply with that. The Pontifex Maximus answered, we depend on the labor of the elves, despite the writings of our comrade here. Even if we wish to do what you're asking, we simply can't. The elves plow our fields, harvest our crops. I'm aware. Nua answered, I remember. But the rest of your neighbors are telling you that if you continue to insist on doing as you've always done, it is going to get very expensive. No more wheat from Rias ties. No place to take theocracy coin. No place will receive theocracy products. You may lash our backs to make us work, but nobody wants what you produce. How long will you last then? Nua made the practical point, and except for Dominic's red face, and Raymond's serene, but serious expression, the others turned a pale shade of grey. We still refuse. Your kind belong at human feet. That hasn't changed. The will of the gods is perfect and must always be followed. Get out. Go back where you came from before I take you and show you again that you should never defy humanity. Dominic's temper exploded, but Nua met flaming face with eyes of flint. If you try it again, what happened to me will happen to your entire country. I promise you, Nua said without averting her gaze. I've said my piece, delivered my message. Cardinal Raymond, would you see me out? She asked, and Raymond got to his feet to do exactly that. The arguing was audible all the way to the bottom of the stairs as they left. Layali looked down at the stump where her leg had been. Strangely enough, there was no pain. The crystalline-eyed man seemed indifferent to her one way or another, and she finally asked him, "What's the point of this, Mr. Urge?" "To see if your leg will start to regrow. The same as when we had your eye removed yesterday," he said as he used various chronomancy spells on her and studied the flow of blood and mana alike. "Oh." She scratched her head. "I guess it's fine as long as I don't have to remember and there's no pain. And I'll remember the ice cream and stickers, right?" "Yes, as always you will remember the good parts," he said as she reached up to touch her eye, trying to recall what she had completely forgotten. "Is this really helping?" she asked him from where she sat on the metal table. "I believe so. I'm closer than ever to finding out the secrets I need to ensure the success of our experiment on our Lord. And when it is complete, he will be immortal, unkillable, and unstoppable, instead of simply unstoppable and slightly immortal," Demiurge explained to the precocious, curious half-elf child. "Well, all right then, as long as there's ice cream and it doesn't hurt, I guess it's fine, but how long do I have to hold these crystals in my hand? My arms are getting tired, Mr. Urge." She pouted a little until he said, "Just until I've removed your arms. We'll put them back when I determine how long it takes for the mana to stop flowing after they're removed," he explained, and Layali sighed with relief. "Good. Mama and Papa are taking me riding, and then we're going to see the bald scholar, so I'll need my arms after we're done here," she said, and waited patiently for the experiment to end. Cocytus held the soft toy sword down to the infant in the cradle. The young boy's hands went for it immediately. "Is that a gift from CZ?" Kalko asked when she entered arm in arm with Kellett.
Yes. I think
he
likes it, Cocytus answered when he looked over his shoulder at the two. I'm sure he does. Kellett gave a little grin up at the insectoid guardian. While at first his settling in had been uncomfortable, the warrior made a name for himself among the martial soldiers and lords alike within the capital, and quickly became a fixture in court life for his manners, valor, and reverence for the honored dead. But how long will it be before he can really use one? Kellett asked, and Cocytus answered by letting go of it when the infant had it, then watching the small child begin to swing the little plush toy around like wild. When he can walk, we begin, Cocytus answered. Kalko reached down and poked the boy's nose, and magic, as soon as he can talk. The children of Einsulgaun will be a force that causes the whole world to tremble in awe. I'm sure we'll be very proud of them all. As if he agreed with them, the baby began to laugh. Queen Draudilin looked down at the array of elves kneeling in front of her. Newly ennobled, they constituted the ranks of those who shared her time in captivity with the Elf King, and as such, they knelt in fine robes befitting formal occasions embroidered with the dragon logo of the draconic royal line, silver on bright blue in practical designs that could be quickly secured or shed, and which would protect against the elements if one had to leave in haste without proper preparation. Who suffers beside me is my brother, my sister, my shield and sword, the draconic queen said, and as such I know I can trust you to carry this out. While you have been given towns and lands in the east of my kingdom, I trust you will not forget your mission. My queen, they said in unison. We will run Slavi-napping operations all across the eastern theocracy, we will bring them here and settle them in our lands, far from their oppressors' reach, and never show mercy to the whip-bearers who must die along the way. Very good. This is for your people, my people, and myself. The slain theocracy caused a great deal of suffering to us all, and for that, we will pay them back. Now rise, go, secure your homes, and then get to work. My queen. The elves said as one, and rose to carry out her orders. The push and pull of body against body went back and forth for hours as she reveled in her lover's embrace. He too savored the feel of her fingers clawing at his back as they tumbled over a bedroll the size of the royal tent in which they slept. As the wandering crowns enjoyed the feel of the air wafting through the mesh screens, so also did they enjoy the feel of each other's hot breath and the taste of each other's heated skin. It was only when they came to a climactic release together that the urgent motions slowed, stopped, and they lay entwined in one another's arms at rest. I like living like this, she said, tracing her hand over his chest. Most empresses do, he said with a cocky smile. She bonked his nose gently and replied. I mean the traveling, I've already seen so much, but now I know how little even that much is. I hope we can live like this for a good long time. I do too, it'll be a long time before we have to settle into one central place at least. Brain suggested, being seen, swapping out ineffective nobles for effective ones, stamping out any remaining criminal elements. At least we're on good terms with the lizardmen, and trade in fish for goods is helping make things better along the border with the lake. Being emperor and empress may be a lot of work, but it does have its benefits. Like the way our little princess is thriving? She suggested. Nor was she wrong, they both thought of the way Layali was learning to handle a sword, not to mention her court etiquette was much better than that of her parents, and she returned from Nazareth every week, happier than before. We still have to make the theocracy pay. Brain remarked. That country put her in Cerebrate's hands. I won't be happy until they've paid a heavy price for their hand in all of this. Nor I, and I have to know the truth. Did Senna have a hand in the attempt on my life, or not? Other than Raymond, do I have anyone there who she would have said more? But Brain silenced her with a kiss that devoured her lips before her emotions could get the better of her. Don't think about that right now, think about something else, Brain whispered into her ear and gave it a little love nip. Like how I have a husband, a child, and maybe another along the way? She winked. Are you? He asked, blinking as he was caught off guard. But she answered with a breathy whispering moan, not yet, but as you've helped me with so much already, I was hoping you'd help me with that too. She suggested and reached for his shaft with her nimble fingers. What kind of husband would refuse a request like that? He asked, and did not keep her waiting. His lips fell over hers, and they set to the task with all the vigor it deserved. Senna stretched out under the white flowering trees. The scent, at least to his nose, was fair to good, and with his arms crossed under his head, he let out a steady groan of comfort. "Gah, that's better," he said to nobody at all. The long vines hid his presence, and the shadow cast overhead was thick enough to create a comfortable shade from the summer sun. At his side sat a bow worth more than a prince's ransom, as well as a spear for serious defense if it were needed. On his body was a simple ashen grey cloak with streaks of black, green, and brown that served as camouflage. But there was nothing to be worried about. Not that he could tell. His hunt was successful enough that a few beasts sat wrapped in wild preserving vines, waiting for him to roast them after what he was about to do. His favorite part, to be precise, also the smile on his face said. One foot crossed over the other and he gnawed idly at the sweet twig in his mouth while he waited to drift off to sleep and nap for hours. The sweet twig was of a peculiar variety of tree only found there in the Abelian Hills. It was his second favorite part about his hunting expeditions. "And they think I'm hunting out in the woods near Ikari." Ha! He laughed at that. The monsters in the Abelian Hills were few, which was the point. A little hunting and a lot of laziness, that was the real point. The demi-humans who occupied the region were now fairly tame. They moved in larger groups, but more predictably as fixed paths were laid down and fixed settlements were forming. They wouldn't believe it back home, but it really is turning into a kingdom over here. He thought and yawned deeply. He could feel himself starting to doze off and thought about the shock he faced when he first saw actual humans, but strangely enough, they appeared to be neither frightened nor abused. They won't like that in Kamimiyako. He snorted. Non-human and human enmity was a staple of their religion and politics. The two groups getting along was almost as big of a threat to the state as war itself. But for Senna? Pain is pain, dead is dead. Maybe something better will come of all this, like a longer nap for me. He smirked, spat the sweet bark stick out of his mouth when the tip lost its flavor, yawned once more, and fell asleep. He didn't know how long he lay there, but when he awoke, it was instant. The pressure above caused the tree he lay against to sway, and that was all it took, because the scent it carried with it was very much like a dragon. The noise hit next. He could hear the beating wings, but the thick cover of the flowering trees and the dangling vines obscured his vision. It doesn't matter how far I can see if I've got things in my way. He mentally cursed. The sound was slowing down, coming closer. He reached for the spear that lay beside his hunting bow and took it into practiced fingers while he rose silently to his feet. "All right, poacher, you've got some nerve hunting on the private reserves of the Queen of Frost. Now you've got a choice, either I come in there, or you come out." A voice called from beyond when he heard the blades of grass bend as the interloper landed. That doesn't sound like a dragon, Senna thought with confusion in his mind. It was far, far too feminine. But one thing he knew, if he went out, a fight was probable. If he waited, it could be avoided. The peace trees were known to be sacred, even as far away as the theocracy, and as such, he chose to wait, but not in silence. "Why don't you come in? If I go out there, I'll have to fight, and this is my vacation, damn it. I have no bloody intentions of having it ruined by killing the royal pisspot carrier of some purple-asked noble." Naya fumed. Her pale face didn't blush as much as it used to, but the scaled skin turned a shade darker. "Nobody has talked to me that way in a damn good while. Son of a..." She took a deep breath, her tail lashed behind her, but going into the trees and committing violence would not be acceptable. "Listen here, you pig sticker, I'll have you know my ass is not purple. At best my ass is an off-white with shades of blue from the scales. And I'm no pisspot carrier. I'm the damn queen of this country, and you're on my land hunting my private stock," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how long it took to clear out the monsters that tasted terrible from this area, and restock it with the kind I liked? A long time and a lot of work. Now get your ass out here and your queen may show some leniency as a gesture of respect for at least being good at poaching." She huffed, and frost chilled the grass in front of her, a drift of white that melted under the summer sun almost as soon as it settled. "The queen? Okay. This is different. Kill her, and I may solve a real problem before it begins. Or start a war. But also, my vacation would be ruined. Shit." Senna cursed. "I'm no subject of the queen," he shot out in frustration, only to immediately cover his mouth. Naya heard the words and the slap of skin over a mouth,
Human skin was a little more malleable than that of orcs or goblins, and other races didn't smack a hand over their mouths when they said something they didn't mean to. A human? From the Holy Kingdom? Nia was now intrigued. You're a long way from Hobans, human. It was only a few boar and a cockatrice. Come out from the peace trees, and I promise I will be lenient. I'll charge you for the cost of your stolen stock and send you back to the Roblé Holy Kingdom alive, Nia said more diplomatically. She opened her hands as if the one hidden within could have seen them, and took a step forward. Senna laughed involuntarily. That would be a problem. Damn it. Listen. I'm armed, but I'll set down my spear. But come inside and I'll explain myself. Nia frowned. Are you running from something? An exile from the Civil War? That ended years ago. How are you only here now? She asked, and the voice within cleared his throat. It'll be easier if we talk where I know I won't have to kill you. I think my vacation is probably already ruined. I'd rather not make it worse with some unplanned regicide. Senna called out as calmly as he could, but a playful lilt hit his voice anyway. Part of Nia knew she should have been furious by the implication of regicide, but his voice was so playful and his attitude so nonchalant. And his obsession with his time off was so damn disarming, it was difficult for her to feel any real anger. Fine, I came all the way out here already. What's 20 more paces? Nia said back, and walked to the trees. She pushed her way through the dangling white and found a black-clad man of slender, athletic build. His cloak was different from the rest of his clothing, designed for simple magic-free camouflage, but his bow and spear, not to mention the rest of his clothing, it all screamed wealth and status. He was seated cross-legged with his back against the tree, and she did the same, her tail lashing behind her as she went, her wings folded in, and she cleared her throat. Queen Nyabaraha of the Kingdom of Demalbian. And you, poacher? She asked, gesturing to him with an open hand, palm upturned and talons clicking. Senna. Senat Hakoni, captain of the Black Scripture of the slain theocracy. He inclined his head, and waited for the queen to leap to her feet and call for her guards, only for her to instead cock her head, raise her brow and ask, "Did you hit your head? Are you quite well, human?" she asked, and he tapped his skull several times. "Seems fine to me." He smirked. "You don't believe me?" "No, but if you share that meat, I'll forget about this, cook it, and we can eat together. At least after we share our meal, I can promise I can't kill you. You'll be an official guest." She pointed out, her finger leveled at the delicious-looking haunch of monster meat. "That's a hell of an invitation. How can I say no?" he said so dryly that Nia wanted something to drink just by hearing it. "You can't, it's good to be the queen." She smirked, baring her fangs. "We've got to start somewhere," he said with a shrug, and got up to his feet, and taking up his kill, he followed after her. As before, everything falls into place again, Ein said as he walked the Hall of Nazarick with the available guardians in tow. "I have no idea how, but it worked out exceptionally well, so I can't very well complain," he thought to himself. "Ja, mein Vater, but one thing I must ask, have I permission to join the Wandering Crowns to further court mine little vampire?" Pandora's actor asked. "You still call her that, even though she's Ein stopped." "Never mind, I won't ask why." "You may. She is still herself after all." "Ja, and believes I have always been Lord Moman. When I revealed myself to be your son, she was both surprised and pleased." Pandora's actor explained, though he added, "Lakeuse however, her shame is immeasurable. She weeps at night and pleads for forgiveness in her dreams, and in the morning she pleads with her sisters. Whether they forgive her or not, he clutched his heart melodramatically, "I pity her, but do not also. If the love of sisters be as great as..." Ainz cleared his throat to cut off the dramatic guardian. "Time will tell, some things shouldn't be lightly forgiven, no matter the reason. But yes, you can go. Take a few magic items with you if you like. My beloved, I know you were set on going to the throne room, but, if it is not too much for me to ask, could we call?" "No, not Pestonia. She and Urialpha went to investigate the matter of our orphanages after Emperor Unglaeus's complaint." "Yes, Lupus Regina Beta, and could you join me? It seems it is time for you to become a father," Albedo said, and Ein stopped in his tracks. Though Albedo was showing considerably, he'd thought it was early nonetheless. "Now?" he exclaimed as his blood ran cold. "All the time with my firstborn, asking how to do things, watching how Kalka and Kelith did things, and somehow I'm as nervous as before." "If it pleases my lord," Albedo said and put her hands over her belly, "I suppose I could try to hold them in until it's more convenient, but I don't know how long I can manage." She looked at him with a hopeful smile, one that looked almost amused at his surprise. "Now, but I assumed that." "No, I've been thinking in terms of humans. But elves are a little longer than humans unless they're half-elves. Orcs are faster. It's not like I know how long a half-demon child should take." He thought and cursed himself for his foolish preconceptions. "Yes, now, right now," Ainz exclaimed, and all thoughts of the throne room fled from his mind, and they did not return to his head for the hours of waiting, nor for days after the first moment he held his firstborn daughter, nor, unexpectedly, his second-born son. His mind was elsewhere, and there was not anyone present who would have had it any other way. V75 Intermission. The best vacation ever. Senna stretched out under the white flowering trees. The scent, at least to his nose, was fair to good, and with his arms crossed under his head, he let out a steady groan of comfort. "Car, that's better," he said to nobody at all. The long vines hid his presence, and the shadow cast overhead was thick enough to create a comfortable shade from the summer sun. At his side sat a bow worth more than a prince's ransom, as well as a spear for serious defense if it were needed. On his body was a simple ashen gray cloak with streaks of black, green, and brown that served as camouflage. But there was nothing to be worried about. Not that he could tell. His hunt was successful enough that a few beasts sat wrapped in wild preserving vines, waiting for him to roast them after what he was about to do. His favorite part, to be precise, or so the smile on his face said. One foot crossed over the other and he gnawed idly at the sweet twig in his mouth while he waited to drift off to sleep and nap for hours. The sweet twig was of a peculiar variety of tree only found there in the Abelian Hills. It was his second favorite part about his hunting expeditions. "And they think I'm hunting out in the woods near Ikari." Ha! He laughed at that. The monsters in the Abelian Hills were few, which was the point. A little hunting and a lot of laziness, that was the real point. The demi-humans who occupied the region were now fairly tame. They moved in larger groups, but more predictably as fixed paths were laid down and fixed settlements were forming. They wouldn't believe it back home, but it really is turning into a kingdom over here. He thought and yawned deeply. He could feel himself starting to doze off and thought about the shock he faced when he first saw actual humans, but strangely enough, they appeared to be neither frightened nor abused. "They won't like that in Kamimiyako," he snorted. Non-human and human enmity was a staple of their religion and politics. The two groups getting along was almost as big of a threat to the state as war itself. But for Senna? Pain is pain, dead is dead. Maybe something better will come of all this, like a longer nap for me. He smirked, spat the sweet bark stick out of his mouth when the tip lost its flavor, yawned once more, and fell asleep. He didn't know how long he lay there, but when he awoke, it was instant. The pressure above caused the tree he lay against to sway, and that was all it took, because the scent it carried with it was very much like a dragon. The noise hit next. He could hear the beating wings, but the thick cover of the flowering trees and the dangling vines obscured his vision. "It doesn't matter how far I can see if I've got things in my way," he mentally cursed. The sound was slowing down, coming closer. He reached for the spear that lay beside his hunting bow and took it into practiced fingers while he rose silently to his feet. "All right, poacher, you've got some nerve hunting on the private reserves of the Queen of Frost. Now you've got a choice, either I come in there, or you come out." A voice called from beyond when he heard the blades of grass bend as the interloper landed. That doesn't sound like a dragon, Senna thought with confusion in his mind. It was far, far too feminine. But one thing he knew, if he went out, a fight was probable. If he waited, it could be avoided. The peace trees were known to be sacred, even as far away as the theocracy, and as such, he chose to wait, but not in silence. "Why don't you come in? If I go out there, I'll have to fight, and this is my vacation, damn it. I have no bloody intentions of having it ruined by killing the royal pisspot carrier of some purple-asked noble." Naya fumed. Her pale face didn't blush as much as it used to, but the scaled skin turned a shade darker. "Nobody has talked to me that way in a damn good while. Son of a..." She took a deep breath, her tail lashed behind her, but going into the trees and committing violence would not be acceptable. "Listen here, you pig sticker, I'll have you know my ass is not purple, at best my ass is an off-white with shades of blue from the scales. and I'm no pisspot carrier. I'm the damn queen of this country, and you're on my land hunting my private stock," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how long it took to clear out the monsters that tasted terrible from this area, and restock it with the kind I liked? A long time and a lot of work. Now get your ass out here and your queen may show some leniency as a gesture of respect for at least being good at poaching." She huffed, and frost chilled the grass in front of her, a drift of white that melted under the summer sun almost as soon as it settled.
"The queen? Okay. This is different.
Kill her, and I may solve a real problem before it begins.
Or start a war. But also, my vacation would be ruined. Shit."
Senna cursed. "I'm no subject of the queen," he shot out in frustration, only to immediately cover his mouth. Naya heard the words and the slap of skin over a mouth. Human skin was a little more malleable than that of orcs or goblins, and other races didn't smack a hand over their mouths when they said something they didn't mean to. A human? From the Holy Kingdom? Naya was now intrigued. "You're a long way from Hobans, human. It was only a few boar and a cockatrice. Come out from the peace trees, and I promise I will be lenient. I'll charge you for the cost of your stolen stock and send you back to the Roblé Holy Kingdom alive," Naya said more diplomatically. She opened her hands as if the one hidden within could have seen them, and took a step forward. Senna laughed involuntarily. "That would be a problem. Damn it. Listen. I'm armed, but I'll set down my spear. But come inside and I'll explain myself." Naya frowned. "Are you running from something? An exile from the Civil War? That ended years ago. How are you only here now?" she asked, and the voice within cleared his throat. "It'll be easier if we talk where I know I won't have to kill you. I think my vacation is probably already ruined. I'd rather not make it worse with some unplanned regicide." Senna called out as calmly as he could, but a playful lilt hit his voice anyway. Part of Naya knew she should have been furious by the implication of regicide, but his voice was so playful and his attitude so nonchalant. And his obsession with his time off was so damn disarming, it was difficult for her to feel any real anger. "Fine, I came all the way out here already. What's 20 more paces?" Naya said back, and walked to the trees. She pushed her way through the dangling white and found a black-clad man of slender, athletic build. His cloak was different from the rest of his clothing, designed for simple magic-free camouflage, but his bow and spear, not to mention the rest of his clothing, it all screamed wealth and status. He was seated cross-legged with his back against the tree, and she did the same, her tail lashing behind her as she went, her wings folded in, and she cleared her throat. "Queen Naya Baraha of the Kingdom of Demalbian. And you, poacher?" she asked, gesturing to him with an open hand, palm upturned and talons clicking. "Senna. Senat Hakoni, captain of the Black Scripture of the Slain Theocracy." He inclined his head, and waited for the queen to leap to her feet and call for her guards, only for her to instead cock her head, raise her brow and ask, "Did you hit your head? Are you quite well, human?" she asked, and he tapped his skull several times. "Seems fine to me." He smirked. "You don't believe me?" "No, but if you share that meat, I'll forget about this, cook it, and we can eat together. At least after we share our meal, I can promise I can't kill you. You'll be an official guest," she pointed out, her finger leveled at the delicious-looking haunch of monster meat. "That's a hell of an invitation. How can I say no?" he said so dryly that Naya wanted something to drink just by hearing it. "You can't, it's good to be the queen." She smirked, baring her fangs. "We've got to start somewhere," he said with a shrug, and got up to his feet, and taking up his kill, he followed after her. On their way out, Naya's curiosity got the better of her and she asked, "Even supposing I believed your crazy lie, why would the Black Scripture captain be here of all places other than to kill me? Even if I accept the possibility, to announce himself would be just absurd. Our nations are not exactly on friendly terms, you know. I'm an animal after all." Naya pointed out and searched the boyish face of the human for hatred, violence, or deception when she described herself in their terms. She found only bemusement. "I guess that's fair. I didn't believe you were the queen until your royal scaliness walked in," Senna replied with a shrug. "My royal what?" Naya half demanded. "Well, you're right, it doesn't look like any of you is purple." Senna looked her up and down like a bar patron checked out his waitress, "But you do have a bit of scaliness." "Not much though. Still looks like skin to me." "Are you trying to pick a fight?" Naya demanded and crossed her arms. Senna stretched out his legs and put his hands behind his head before shaking it. Nah, I just don't really have a filter. No offense, Majesty. And as for what I'm here for, like I said, vacation. I get a month off per year and I come out here to hunt. Mostly for good places to nap and for more of the sweet bark trees. He licked his lips. Great stuff, though I do hunt a little. I was here before you. So you're more of an interloper than I am. Naya's mouth dropped open, revealing her sharp and predatory teeth. You have got to be kidding me. He shook his head again. No, really. He cocked his head and looked her over again. You really are the queen here, huh? They'd probably tell me to kill you, but... But? Naya asked, clicking the talons on her hand as she held her tongue. But if I did do that, it'd probably spark a war with my country, and I'd probably never be able to vacation here again. Plus the sweet bark trees are good building material. If the theocracy invaded, they'd chop them all down, they'd be gone in a year or 3 if we won, and we'd be ruined if we lost. I'd miss those. Senna reflected in a quiet, gentle voice and yawned again. Are you saying you aren't here for my life, and wouldn't take it anyway because you like sweet bark and naps? Naya blinked. Are you just... She held up a hand as if to stop him, but in fact stopped herself to take a deep breath. I'm on the verge of talking you into at least trying to kill me just because that kind of laziness is. By the dead gods. I'm at a loss for words. Naya dropped her hand, threw back her head to look up at the white flowering on the branches above, and began a long, rich, hearty laugh that heaved her chest, made her wings spasm, and went on for so long that her diaphragm began to hurt. Senna only smirked. When she finally stopped, he asked, so I guess you're the workaholic sort, minus the occasional bit of hunting. She pounded on her chest several times and nodded in assent. I'm the queen. Of course I work long hours, I'm building a kingdom to last, and that means setting deep roots. HMPF, I actually believe that. I was vacationing out here when you got started building. Back home the cardinals think that killing you would destroy your whole country. I, however, have come back several times since then. Maybe it was true once, but not anymore. Even if we got rid of you, they'd just pick someone else, or just turn your country over to the Allfather and we'd be worse off. But politicians never believe people out in the field. A light of camaraderie at long remember frustration came into her sky blue eyes and Naya smacked her knee with her palm. Tell me about it. When I was still a human, I had to fight harder to warn politicians about the danger ahead than I did to actually fight the danger itself. Then if I won, they said there was nothing to worry about, and if I didn't, it was either that I didn't give them enough warning or it was my fault for having to withdraw without victory. Senna completely forgot in that instant that he was looking at the Queen of Frost, the monster whose invasion had destroyed an army of humans and taken a massive human city, and destroyed a hero of humanity, as the theocracy placed the blame, and instead it seemed like she was just another soldier like himself, used to being out on her own and then explaining herself to people who didn't understand what she was trying to tell them. So, nameless soldier who claims to be the Black Scripture captain. Naya finally said with their sense returned, her tail lashed behind her again, more playfully this time. Suppose I at least accept that you're from the theocracy and offer to return you there, provided you share with me the meat you've taken, and that it gets prepared at my palace instead of out here in the field. Consider yourself my guest, and then we will send you home again afterward. Senna raised one finger. I have one condition, he said, that you do not make it an official deportation. No informing the theocracy, just drop me at the border. I haven't negotiated with anyone since the war ended, or not much at least. Naya retorted and raised one finger of her own, but on one other condition, that the next time you choose to vacation in my country, you come to inform me of it. I will issue a personal pass to use my private reserve. It's the least reward I can offer for having made me laugh today, twice, no less. You still don't believe I am who I say I am? Senna asked. That's a bit rude. So is poaching, but here we are. Naya retorted, and their briefly serious faces melted away after holding steady stares at one another without blinking until the unlooked-for staring contest began to devolve into chortles of laughter again. But what to call you next time? Naya rubbed her chin. Ah yes. I know. She clicked her talons together, and shook her head while she stood up, and he looked at her questioningly. Next time you come here. She admonished him and held out her hand to offer to help him up. He accepted it, and popped up to his feet at the light tug she gave to him. Her talons, notably, were used with care and did not leave a scratch. He went over to his pack, threw it over his shoulder, picked up his bow and spear, and followed the queen out of the trees just as a mixed party of humans and orcs in full armor arrived on both wolfback and horseback. Naya raised a hand to stop them before the thundering hooves and panting wolves could draw too close. "Everything is fine. Our nameless friend here will be a guest in my home for a few days, then he can be deported." Senna grinned at the mixed party and gave a congenial wave without any hint of hostility, and the party relaxed. For the next few days after riding back to her palace he was wined and dined by the queen, and the pair traded stories of their exploits in the wild. "So is it true that you actually brought down a dragon?" Senna asked on their final night dining alone at a table in her great hall. "No, that story is a pile of fumes," Naya answered. "Few whats?" he asked. "Dragon shit. Dragon shit is called fumes," Naya explained. "I didn't bring it down, he landed already wounded, I was supposed to kill him, of course." She sighed and looked down into the cup of red wine, "But he said please. He asked for my help, he was in pain, his spirit and body shattered into pieces, his eyes were haunted, everything about him was just lost. I couldn't do it. So I nursed him back to health over the course of several months until I was caught, tried, and sent to be executed for it. You know the rest. Now, this is the result." She took a long swift drink and then filled her cup again. "I know the feeling. Being part of the scripture, hunting threats to people was what I did, but sometimes the threat wasn't a real threat. Just some dumb beast driven out of its hunting range. Most monsters are just that, more dangerous animals." "Like me?" Naya asked and batted her wings pointedly toward him. He shrugged at that. "We haven't fought, but I'm not some temple priest who hasn't been far from the four walls of a city. I've seen elves just trying to get their families to safety, or a vampire that even begged me to kill it so it wouldn't kill anyone else. Things out in the field, they get complicated. The enemy isn't always an enemy, and evil isn't always evil. That's why I can sit here with you and not say you're just some beast, like most of the priests would say." He finished off his own cup and held it out just as she finished pouring her own. She moved the bottle over to refill his own cup and they propped their feet up on the table. "I suppose that's so," Naya said and raised her cup. "To pleasant complications." "I'll drink to that," Senna answered, and when their cups were drained he said, "I have to leave tomorrow, you know. I have somewhere to be, I won't be able to send you off, and I don't like goodbyes, so just to get it out of the way I will answer with, till next time." Naya replied, "I'll have an escort take you to the eastern border and give you a good horse to get the rest of the way home, nameless theocracy citizen." "I keep telling you, my name is Senna," he answered. She looked at him with a long, lingering stare of her piercing blue eyes until he sighed and gave up. "Fine. Till next time," he said, subdued. They parted after that, going to their separate rooms. Senna reached his door, opened it, and then after stepping within, he began to close it, only to stop just a hair before it was to seal shut. "No," he thought, and opened it enough that it was just a crack open, enough to be obvious if one looked, but gave the appearance that someone intended to close it. Just in case, he thought, then stripped and got into the bed, pulling the blanket of thick fur pelts over his bare chest, and waited, staring at the ceiling until he fell asleep. Naya, for her part, reached her quarters and found guards waiting for her arrival. 2 bladers, their natural armaments made them ideal security. She glanced up at them. "I will not be sleeping tonight, you two may take the evening off." "That's our queen," the taller blader said with pride, "always working hard for us." They bowed deeply, and left. Naya stepped within, then shut the door so that only a crack was open. "What are you doing, Naya? You barely know him, you don't even know his real name. Just his crazy story. But he's formidable. And good-looking, and he hasn't flinched even once when you've looked at him. Who cares? He's leaving tomorrow and will probably never come back. Just have some fun for once in your life." She reassured herself, then cast aside her clothing and laid herself down in the bed to wait and see if he came to her. She was still waiting when she fell asleep. True to form, she didn't see him off. She only left instructions to have him escorted back before she went off on errands of her own, and tried to forget her disappointment. "You should have known better,"
she told herself, and went back to her constant work routine as if nothing changed at all. She didn't think of him much for another year. Her work went on without stopping. New towns, new villages, and shepherding the growth of trade with animal produce and budding industries established around them, and even the slow and tightly controlled rise of a cosmopolitan small city at the crossroads of several trading areas on the long road between east and west. She didn't think of him much, that was, until a guard at the door approached her throne and said, with a most confused look on his face, "Your Majesty, a human in black and bearing a long black spear has come for an audience. He says you are expecting him. He calls himself Senataconi, and says you promised him access to your hunting preserve. Should I send him away?" Naya's face brightened on her throne with a great big fangy smile. "Where is the ass?" she exclaimed and clapped her hands. "See him in." Senna entered the great hall, and before he could even greet her she shouted, There is the ass." His dark eyes blinked and he ran a hand through his hair and groaned, "That's what you put on my pass, isn't it, Majesty?" "You're damn right," Naya quipped. "It's the least I could do," she said with a smirk. He rolled his eyes and began to laugh. "It's good to see you again, Your Majesty," he replied. And so it went, a repeat of the year before. She took him hunting, and to her surprise, she enjoyed her first nap in years. Again on their last night, each left their own door open for the other, and each one slept while waiting, only to sleep again with nothing happening but dreams before they parted ways. For 3 years this went on, and in Naya's eyes, the curious warrior's visits became her own time of rest, until she named his annual arrival the first official holiday of her kingdom, when no work would be done at all that wasn't absolutely vital, so that everyone in the kingdom could enjoy a few days of ease in the sun. Back home in the slain theocracy, the growing prosperity of Deme Albion did not sit well. But Senna gave it no thought until the day he was summoned. It wasn't his first time in the chamber of the Pontifex Maximus, far from it. Each occasion had one singular purpose. What fresh threat to humanity requires its champion? From anyone else it would have been an arrogant thought, but as the leader of the Black Scripture, he knew very well that there was only one other who could claim the title of humanity's trump card. He knocked on the heavy oaken door, and the rough voice of the old man called out to him, "Come in." He opened the door and found the old man stooped over a scroll. He gestured to the seat across from him, and Senna flopped himself down in the chair, resting his spear on his lap. He asked point blank, "So what'll it be this time, old man? Did a vampire have a baby with a Barghest and give birth to some chain fetishist's sparkly wet dream?" The wrinkled sunken cheeks of the grey old Pontifex did not express surprise well in the best of times, and as it was, the old man only groaned. "No, Senna, please. Be serious for once." He pointed to the scroll on his desk. "We can't wait for Deme Albion to fall apart on its own anymore. This is a copy of a treaty between them and the Allfather of the Kingdom of Nazarick. Goodness knows how the animals in the West have managed to not kill each other for the last few years, but if they start trading in high-quality weapons, we'll have a real problem on our hands. I need to know." He leaned forward and said with a hushed tone as if he feared to be overheard, "Humanity needs you to go to the heart of that cursed country, and kill the Queen of Frost. Kill Naya Baraha and dispose of her body. I know your usual vacation time is coming up, but that happens to fall at the same time as some kind of holiday over there. You can take your time off after she's dead. Just go in, kill her, and get out before they fall into civil war. Then you can come home and hunt to your heart's content for a month." "Do you think you can take her alone?" the Pontifex asked. His thin lips formed a tiny frown. Senna barely registered the question. "You'll start a war with them, a war you may not win," Senna said, his face losing all color. "Nonsense," the Pontifex replied abruptly. "Their warriors are strong, but in the end even the strongest and smartest are only beasts. They're held together by force. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will turn on each other. They'll rip their own kingdom apart and that will be the end of it. Perhaps we can even help the unfortunate humans there turn it into a new human kingdom." "I don't need help," Senna finally replied, ignoring the mangled metaphor. "Anyone less than Zeshi would just be in the way." He then stood up and gripped his spear tight in one hand. "I'll leave now." "No request for more vacation as a reward? No objections about already being busy? Are you feeling all right, my boy?" the Pontifex asked. "No, yes, I'm fine. Like you said, this is important, right?" Senna asked. Correct. I'm glad you're taking this seriously. The Pontifex almost sighed in relief while Senna departed on silent feet. Good luck. The old man called out, only to receive no response from the Black Scripture captain. 3 weeks later he heard the familiar call beyond the great double doors of Naya's palace. Where is the ass? And when he entered the great hall filled with now familiar faces, many of which he counted as friends, she stood from her throne and shouted, there is the ass. Senna's dark thoughts evaporated as he went to the throne and stuck out a hand. They clasped forearms as they always did. She took care not to use her talons, and though she didn't know it, he took care not to use too much strength. Welcome again, mysterious stranger. Have you come with more stories of captaining the Black? Senna plastered a smile on his face and barely kept his hold on the spear loose. Yes, of course, but those can wait, he replied with a smirk plastered on his face. I was hoping for a hunt first. A hunt? That's oddly energetic of you. But I don't mind, our holiday began 3 minutes ago. Naya replied and looked over to Nazreen. Her secretary rang a bronze gong, and a cheer went up as all duties were suspended. As the cheers went on and Naya stepped farther from her throne and closer to her friend, she said under her breath, you made a lot of hatred against humans start to die off when you became the reason they all get vacations. Naya chortled a little, only half kidding, and then walked past him, slapping him on the back. She was several steps past him when she realized he wasn't at her side, but was instead still standing back and looking at her. What? She asked, turning to face him. Is something wrong? Senna forcibly shook his head. It's nothing that can't wait, let's go. All right then, ass, she said with a wink, and held in her sigh of relief when he smiled at her stand-in name for him. Within a few hours on the preserve, they'd bagged 2 large boars, and each carrying one of them, they made their way to a familiar spot. A spot Senna chose himself. The peace tree grove where they met. Something is up with you, Naya finally said after they walked in silence for a full hour straight. Normally you'd have told a dozen jokes by now and given me a half a dozen unbelievable stories. Yeah, something is, Senna said as he placed one foot in front of the other in a steady trudge. But it can wait until after we've. Well, maybe it can't wait. Maybe I can't, he muttered under his breath, trailing off into an unintelligible mumble. You haven't even suggested going back for a nap. Are you dying or something? Naya asked. She tried to plaster a smile on her face, but he didn't laugh. Wait. Is that it? Naya asked, her bright blue eyes opened like saucers. I can see if our healers can do anything. Stop it, Senna finally said, then added, please. No, I'm not dying. Oh, well good. I don't have a superabundance of friends, and I'd hate to lose one, even if I don't know your real name, she said just as they reached their destination and Senna dropped his paw. Naya, he said as she set hers down, why don't you believe me? How can you still think I'm not who I say I am? Because it's hard to picture, I guess. Naya replied with a half shrug. Besides, like I said the first time, it's just absurd to think of the Black Scripture captain showing up in my kingdom just to chew on sweet sticks, nap, and hunt. When you put it that way, I suppose it is a tad extreme. But then, what do you think I am? Senna asked while Naya prepared the fire pit. Her claws gouged out the earth easier than 20 shovels, and while she worked she said, I'm surprised you've never asked. I always assumed you were some spoiled rich noble with some talent for combat. Naya replied, I admit my first thought was theocracy spy, but no, that you are not. Senna let out a weary sigh. That does sound like me, he reluctantly acknowledged. I see. He snapped his spear down into the guard position. Then there's no way you'll believe what I say next unless I prove it to you first. His voice became tight, professional, and his eyes narrowed like he was focusing on a target. Queen of Frost, Naya Baraha, I am Senna Takoni of the slain theocracy, captain of the Black Scripture and first among godkin. I challenge you to a duel here and now. Naya looked up from where she stood at the fire pit and frowned. You're serious, aren't you? I am, he answered. There's no way I can convince you unless I beat you first. If you insist, Naya answered with a shrug of her own. He picked up a rock from the ground. When this hits ground, we begin. Agreed, Naya answered, her white eyebrows still up. He could see she wasn't taking him seriously. That would change. Agility boost. Ability boost.
Lesser strength. Fortress. Deft hands. Steel grip. Naya's eyes widened as he used 7 martial arts. If that's how you want it, she said and clicked her talons together. Agility boost. Ability boost. Fortress. Strength of ancestors. Quick step. He tossed the little grey rock into the air, both their eyes followed it. It struck the ground, and Naya's wings carried her forward instantly. Her talons came down, his spear caught them, and to her dismay, the spear did not break. He spun it, she went flying backward, folding in her wings, she landed, flipped back, and came again. Always be on the attack, keep them responding. She wasn't even consciously thinking of the lesson, only applying it. But his spear flicked away her every slash and thrust as if they weren't there. He never gave an inch of ground, he only grew faster. Her slashes and grabs were like those of a raw recruit. Her tail lashed out, and he blocked it too, and that told her the truth. He's holding back his speed. I haven't met my match in years. I'm a damn dragonid. And I'm stronger than I ever was. Her heart raced and her strikes picked up speed again, and yet it seemed to mean nothing. His spear spun and the butt cracked across her jaw. She felt the bone crack as she staggered back. Dull pain, she said and touched her jaw. The pain vanished, and she came again while he waited to receive her. His facial expression never changed, his body never slowed, and every time she picked up speed, he did so, and did more than she. How is this possible? She hissed. Limit break. She added the martial art and redoubled her speed, but the black-haired spearman didn't even bother to use the same. The spear moved faster than she could sense, or even predict. The butt hit her in both her knees, her chest, her shoulders, and then finally at the center of her forehead. Naya sailed backward, her back arching as she saw the orange light cast by the setting sun, and she felt the ground as she slammed into it with all her falling weight. Then he was over her, her hand went up for him to help her up, but to her horror, it was not his hand that swung out to take hers and bring her up. What hovered over her breast was the point of his spear. I'm Senator Koni, captain of the Black Scripture, among the strongest of the strong in humanity, the living descendant of the 6 great gods. Do you believe me now, Naya? He asked, the spear wavering only inches above her body. Her joints ached, her head hurt, but there was no denying it. So, it's true. I didn't see that coming. Naya answered and lowered her extended arm to the ground where it fell limp. Now that you believe me, I can tell you. I've been sent to kill you, Queen of Frost. The slain theocracy demands your head. You've unbalanced the whole damn world by starting a demi-human kingdom here, and they won't ignore you anymore. Was it always the plan? Was it all just a lie? Naya asked, looking up at him from on her back, her entire body limp as she sought the face she wished had joined her many a night before, to see hovering over hers in a night of desire. Her heart began to tear in two, but she held her face steady. I will not let him see me weak, she told herself. Not if I'm going to die. No, he answered instantly. All that was just coincidence. We met by chance and became friends by chance. None of that was staged or faked, it was real, all of it. I see, she answered. The tearing in her heart stopped, but it wasn't lost on her that his spear had not moved away from her. She went on as if it weren't there. That's a relief. You're one of the only friends I've ever had, and definitely one of the only human ones. I'd hate to think I was lied to all this time, Naya said and wiped the blood from her lip before allowing her arm to fall down again. All right then, go ahead and kill me. I can't beat you, I came out alone with you, there's nobody for hours around who could help me, and besides, I may not have many friends, but I have always laid down my life for the few I had. If you need my life, and care more for the theocracy than for me, take it. People like us always come to violent ends, and there are worse ways than dying at the hands of one of my best friends, and the only man I ever loved. Just make it quick, and without pain if you can manage it. Senna, Naya said and closed her eyes. Her heartbeat was slow, steady, her blood didn't race and her breathing didn't quicken. It's just like going to sleep. One quick sting and it's over. A pity about all the deaths that will follow on this though. He can beat me, but I doubt they have anyone that can beat His Majesty Allfather, and there's no way this won't be traced back to the theocracy. She waited. She felt the spear hovering over her breast. She felt his eyes lingering on her still. This must be why he wanted the peace trees, that part must have been true. He really was my friend. If I had to kill him for some reason, This is where I'd have picked it too. But still, it's a shame to die a virgin, never knowing what that's like. I guess I'm not dying completely without regrets. But in my short life, I was a daughter, deeply loved. I was a warrior, I was a legend, I was a general, I was a little sister to a mighty dragon, and I was a queen. It's been a good run, even if it is ending here. Naya smiled in spite of herself. Wait. So you really think I'm going to kill you? And I'm seeing how you'd react if that were the case? If I'm an ass, you're an idiot, Senna said and threw his spear point down into the dirt beside her so that it embedded into the soil and sat up erect as a flagpole. Naya's eyes fluttered open. Wait. What? She asked. Are you deaf too? Senna snapped and put his hands on his hips, his shadow cast over her entire body. Of course I'm not going to kill you. You'd have really let me do it? Naya remained on her back, but now confusion was etched on her face. As I said, if my friends need my life, it's theirs for the asking. Yeah, in a fight, damn it. Woman, you do not take your commitments lightly. No wonder they see you as such a threat. He rubbed the back of his head and looked away more than a little sheepishly. It kind of puts my lazy ass to shame. But wait. Did you mean that other stuff? Naya's face became a kind of ashen gray, but she refused to deny it. Yes. Every visit from the first one on, I left the door to my room open and the way unguarded, hoping you would join me. I left my door unlocked and open too. He, unlike her, could blush, and did. You expect the queen to come to you? You are an ass, Naya snapped up at him. Excuse me, he said with indignance, you expect a visiting foreigner to just waltz up to the queen's bedroom thinking there'd be no guards and he could just go on in like some sort of stalker? It's not stalking if I want you in there, Naya argued. It is if I don't know it, he yelled back, aghast. So I'm supposed to stalk you and be the creeper queen, is that what you're saying? She shot back. It's not creeping if I want you to come in. I left the door open for you, he shouted. Are you completely senseless? What did we just say not 15 seconds ago? She shot back again. Well, what do you want? I couldn't read your mind. He stamped his foot, and the trees wavered 20 paces away. Can you read my damn lips? She demanded. What? He exclaimed with his eyes wide as her breathing picked up. Get down here, Senna. Is that a clear enough signal, you ass? She shouted back up at him. Yes, he said, and dove to shut her up with an impassioned kiss and an embrace that proved decisively that he was who he said he was. What the fuck am I supposed to do after this? Senna wondered, and lost track of the question as he started to enjoy the talons raking his back.